Cool. Great, yeah, so thank you so much for having me today. As Diane said, I'm going to be talking a little bit about F1000Research, so who we are, what we're up to in terms of publishing software, and how we want to further innovate and collaborate with the bioinformatics community to ensure the platform remains somewhere really easy and accessible for computational researchers to publish. So for those of you that don't know, we launched in 2013 as an open access publisher with a mission to really rethink the kind of scholarly communication system, so speed up the sharing of research, improve transparency, and reduce any kind of editorial barriers that can exist for people to publish. More recently, we've set up sister journals to F1000Research for funders, such as the Gates Foundation, the African Academy of Sciences, the Wellcome Trust. So basically a place where they use our publishing model and they can send their grantees to publish here, so somewhere open, quick, and somewhere that is cost effective. So really when we launched, we weren't associated with a big traditional publisher, and we kind of wanted to do things a bit differently. We were born open, and we wanted to tackle some of the problems that we felt existed in the traditional publishing process. So the first problem we wanted to tackle was speed. So as many of you know, it can often take kind of 6 months to a year to get something published. And during that time, it's stuck behind kind of editorial closed doors. So we were really inspired by the preprints. We wanted to publish pretty much immediately, which I'll go through the publishing process in a couple of slides, and then have our peer review process post-publication. So the idea behind this is kind of removing any of that delay, ensuring that when the work is published and it's useful to the community then, it's not outdated, and authors can really kind of share on their own terms. We also wanted to tackle what we saw as the overemphasis on traditional research articles. So we're not trying to get rid of traditional research articles, that's still the majority of what we publish. But we really wanted to be flexible in publishing different research outputs, particularly outputs that don't really kind of fit traditional research articles, or perhaps wouldn't be sufficient by themselves to be considered in the kind of traditional research article format. So some of the different types we do are method articles, systematic reviews, data notes, research notes, which are basically a kind of very condensed version of a traditional research article, the 1 or 2 figures, and then also our software tool article type, which I'll be going into more detail in a bit. But the idea behind this is really, as well as kind of being flexible, is reducing research waste. So allowing research outputs to be published that, again, don't fit that traditional research mold, and also crediting researchers as well. So we know not everything kind of researchers create, again, can kind of fit into that mold. So allowing different outputs to be published and to be credited accordingly for this. We also wanted to tackle what we saw as editorial bias in the system. So particularly kind of publication bias around negative results, replication studies, which we often know kind of traditional journals aren't always that interested in publishing. And really kind of ensuring what we publish is reproducible and also in line with the FAIR guidelines as well. So for us, this really means transparency throughout the process, which begins with our open data policies. So before the article is published, we ask authors to deposit their data in a suitable repository to ensure it's in line with FAIR, and also it's accessible alongside the article, so we can help the authors do that. And then we also carry this transparency throughout the process. So our peer review process is also open. So all the reviewer reports are open, and the reviewers' names and affiliations are always part of those open peer review reports as well. So really, I probably don't need to tell most of you this, but we've got a lot of challenges kind of facing researchers in the software community. And I kind of wanted to put this in to highlight the issues that people who develop code can experience in academia. This is all summed up much nicely than I'm going to do in a blog from the Software Sustainability Institute that I've linked to at the bottom there. And some of the issues, I mean, half the battle is actually getting a title that's inclusive of your role and therefore something ubiquitous that can be used in career paths and also guarantee job security as well. So the Software Sustainability Institute settled on the term research software engineers, and they've kind of used this to build a community around this, which I think is really great, but there's still people often don't kind of see themselves in this role, or people prefer to refer to themselves as something else as well. So it's still a slight issue within the community. And as I'm quoting from the blog here, software is overlooked as merely an uninteresting means of achieving interesting research, which obviously leads to issues around recognition and credit. So if software is published as part of a traditional research article, it can often end up in the method section or as a footnote, and it's not really easily findable for people who could actually use the software. And this goes for kind of credit as well. So obviously the research software engineer would often end up as a kind of middle author. And obviously there are kind of more software specific journals being set up, which is really great to see. And I think it's great for the community, but they're still kind of relatively young. And I think this kind of plays into how researchers are judged and awarded promotions and funding. So being judged for publishing traditional articles in high impact journals is clearly not the way forward. It's not the way forward for any researchers in general, but that's a different side of the story. So we still need to kind of look at how best to evaluate software engineers and incorporate that into academia as a whole. So unfortunately, the culture for everyone is often what many people deem as publish or perish. So as I said, to succeed in academia, secure funding and new jobs is really unfortunately to still publish in high impact journals. So what F1000Research recognizes as part of our role is by publishing the software tool articles as a separate item, it allows research software engineers, bioinformaticians, etc., to get full credit for their work and have an index citable item, whilst trying to make it as easy as possible for computational researchers to publish with us. So we recognize this really seems like quite a small contribution, but really the system is still quite broken. So we feel it's important to provide this space for the software tool articles while also pushing for change as a publisher, but also we recognize this is going to take all the players in the process. So also funders and institutions as well, kind of moving to an evaluation system that is really more fair for the researchers that are working in academia. So our software tool articles, what do they look like? What are they like? So we describe them as an article type describing a tool developed for research. So this can be a novel tool or a tool created from existing software. So this could be a workflow, web app, package, pipeline, etc. We're really kind of broad on this. We ask articles to be written in an open access programming language. And we're mainly publishing tools in the life sciences, but are moving into the physical sciences a bit more as well. Some of the sections we might ask you to include, again, we're pretty flexible, but things like why you developed the software, details of the code, method, examples of data input sets, outputs, and tips on kind of how to maximize the tool's potential. So we've published over 300 software tool articles, and as I said, really a wide range of disciplines and languages as well. They're really fast through the peer review process, which I'm going to go into how that works in a second, but we're looking at really around 70 days from when we publish a software tool article to that being indexed in PubMed, Scopus, and all the kind of standard databases. And the fastest we had to pass peer review was 3 days, so really fast. And yeah, really we find the software tool articles are always well downloaded, viewed, and cited. So really great to have them on the platform, and it also shows it's a good venue for kind of increasing visibility and also getting those citations, which we know are key as well. So it is an article type we've had since we've launched. So we've developed a lot of features over the years to make submitting and publishing easier for computational authors. So you can submit in LaTeX via our overleaf template. We have proper syntax highlighting for code. The versioning system, again, I'll talk about in a minute, but it means you can kind of update your software tool article as and when. And then on the right-hand side here at the top, you can see a CodeOcean capsule, which we can host these widgets within the article. So you can put all the code here, people can run reanalyses and kind of play around with it. So it's a great way of kind of having the code there accessible for anyone on the article rather than having to kind of download it, navigate dependencies and things like that. And also we can host interactive figures as well, which you can see at the bottom. So we can do this via Plotly, or we can also do this via an iframe for things like Shiny apps as well. But yeah, these always look really great, and we think they're a great way to kind of present your data and make it a bit more accessible for readers as well. Also welcome any ideas after the presentation of other things we could incorporate as well. We're really kind of keen to stay ahead of the curve and again, make it easy for computational researchers. We're also running a software tool campaign this year where we're kind of shining a spotlight on what we've already published. So keep an eye out for that. I've linked to it at the bottom. And we also have an Easter egg on there at the moment where you can kind of play around, and we've got a prize. So please do go have a play and try and find the egg. Cool. So now I just wanted to give you a little bit of an introduction on how the publishing process works, as this is quite different to traditional research journals. So what we'll do is one of those article types I described will be submitted to the platform, and then will be checked over by our editorial team. So they'll be doing the open data checks, as I mentioned, but also checking for plagiarism, the methods are adequately described, it's readable, etc. If a paper kind of passes all those editorial checks, then we can typically publish it within about 2 weeks. So at that point, it's an open access article on the platform, it's got a DOI, it's citable, but it's clearly labeled awaiting peer review. We then do this peer review process post-publication. So the idea behind this is that we ask authors to suggest reviewers, we check they're suitable to review the paper, there's no conflict of interest, etc. And then once that's all fine, we'll invite the reviewers on the author's behalf as normal. And then when the review reports come in, we'll give them a quick check over, and then we'll publish them pretty much immediately. So the review reports are there for anyone accessing the article, with the reviewer's name and their affiliation as well. We ask reviewers just to focus on the technical aspects of the work, not the kind of perceived novelty or significance. And what we also ask them to do is choose a status for the paper, which are those 3 symbols you can see in the top right. So the green tick is an approved status, so it means the paper is technically sound in all forms. The green question mark is approved of reservations, so basically like a major revision. And then the red cross is not approved, so there are some kind of fundamental flaws of how the work was carried out. The paper needs to receive a certain number of approved statuses to be indexed in PubMed. If the paper doesn't initially receive the right amount of approved statuses, it remains on the platform, but the authors can revise the paper, publish a new version on top of the old version, and then if the referees feel it's sufficiently improved, update their status. So to illustrate that process a bit more, I've kind of taken a life cycle of a paper on the platform. So you can see here, this is a paper we've just published, which is awaiting that peer review process. So that's highlighted on the right-hand side. And then it's also highlighted in the square brackets behind the title as well. So this always forms part of the citation of the article. So if anyone cites the article at this stage, it will be clear that it's still waiting to undergo the peer review process. And then this is an article that has undergone the peer review process. So what you can see here are the reviewers' names on the right-hand side. You can see reviewer 1 chose to co-review with a colleague, which is something we always encourage. We think it's a great way to get kind of early career researchers involved in the process. They can review with their PI and also get credited as well. And you can see both reviewers here gave the paper an approved reservation status. And then this is also updated in the square brackets behind the title as well. You can see underneath the question marks as well, there's a little bit that says read. So this is where you can find the peer review reports. I've just pulled them out onto the slide here. So you can see here, we've got the reviewer's name and their affiliation. Each review report also has its own DOI, it's citable, and has a view counter as well. So we've got the reviewer status, the reviewer report itself, and then also what we ask is when the authors publish a new version of the paper, that they respond to the referees directly on the paper. So you can kind of see that author response here. It looks a little bit more logical on the page. But really what we find is this is a bit more of a dialogue process between authors and reviewers to help improve the paper rather than the kind of traditional anonymous response to referees. We also ask authors when they publish a new version to fill in this amendments box in the bottom left, which makes it clear what has been changed from the previous version of the article. So you can see here, this is the same article with a version 2 published, the revised version. So you actually can access both previous versions of the article. And you can see here for the version 2, both referees re-reviewed the article, felt it had improved sufficiently, so updated their status to a tick. So at this point, the article would have been indexed in PubMed, Scopus, etc., as it's passed the peer review process. Something nice about this versioning system as well, as I mentioned earlier, is you can do small updates at any stage. So this is particularly nice for software tool articles where if you've kind of tweaked something 6 months later, it's not really enough to publish a whole new process, a whole new paper, sorry, but you'd like to keep the old paper cohesive, then you can kind of go back and update the article for anyone who's using it. So it's quite a nice system. So yeah, we've kind of built strong links with the bioinformatics community over the years and have set up a lot of computational gateways and collections. So these are hubs, some are thematic, so you can see we've got a Python collection, but mainly they're community-based, so allowing communities a dedicated publishing space to increase the visibility of the content published there. So articles are published exactly the same way as I just went through, but they're tagged within these gateways. So as Diane mentioned at the start, we have an ISCB gateway, which we refer to as the community journal. So you can see the landing page for it here. So we've published over 140 articles from ISCB members, and it also hosts non-peer reviewed content as well, such as posters and slides from the past conferences as well. So yeah, I hope you do consider this as a potential publishing venue. It's a great hub for kind of everything ISCB output related as well. And then also what we have is a bioinformatics education and training collection too. So if you're part of the education cozy, you can kind of put your documents, posters and slides here too. So something to consider, hoping to build this up as a bit more of a hub. And all our collection advisors are Goblet members as well. So yeah, it's a good little collection to be part of. Lastly, I just kind of wanted to go through our plans for this year and beyond. So as part of our software tool campaign, we've got kind of 2 things going on. So the first is new content. So we're actually looking at perhaps kind of organizing some long form pieces around issues in kind of software engineering, such as ensuring sufficient credit, the experiences of women in software engineering and more. So if you have any ideas for kind of long form pieces we could do, or if you're actually interested in writing one, that would be amazing. So please do get in touch at the email address below. And then also something we're really keen to explore is code review. It's something we've been talking about for years, but we're actually going to do it this year. So we really see it as a kind of gap in our publishing process, and something that we also want to work cross-publisher on this as well. So if you are another publisher, please do get in touch. So we think it's an important initiative to kind of define what code review should be for academic software articles, what makes good code review, and then eventually we're hoping perhaps at the end of this year to develop the process and implement this at F1000Research. Really at the start of this process, but we're kind of open to a lot of ideas. We're kind of looking at badging after the code review has happened as well. So we're looking to join up a community working group around this. So again, if you're interested in being part of this at all or have any kind of ideas to contribute, please do get in touch at this email address below. And perfect, that's all from me. So thank you so much.
So Vicky, we actually have a question for you, and I hope it's not too controversial and you can answer. So an attendee asked, and I will say to the attendee, I don't know who you are because it's submitted as anonymous, but if you need some more clarification clarification, I'm sure Vicky will be happy to meet with you after this. You can get in touch with her by navigating to the attendee section of the website and then clicking on contact me, and then also through the F1000 booth, which is in our sponsors and exhibitors section. But here's your question. Is it advisable for one to submit an article to the preprint, e.g. bioarchives, and then submit to F1000Research? There is a guideline in F1000Research that says that promotion of an article on social media before completion of peer review process is not encouraged. Doesn't this defeat the purpose of publishing before review?
Yeah, so in terms of bioarchive, we leave it completely up to you. We're more than happy for you to kind of put something on bioarchive, and then we actually have a link so you can submit directly from bioarchive then to F1000. Although obviously we kind of have that preprint part of the process as well. So it's kind of a double preprint, but completely get why you'd want to put it on bioarchive as well. In terms of promoting the article, we're more than happy for you to promote it before it goes through the peer review process. What we really do to put that in our guidelines is more for kind of media stuff. So if you do want to promote it, I think just make it clear that it hasn't undergone the peer review process. I actually think that's a really interesting topic in general. I think what we've seen obviously with COVID is a lot of, particularly in the UK media, I've seen a lot of articles that are just based on preprints, which obviously I think is fine, but it's interesting kind of whether we think things shouldn't be promoted in the media unless they've passed that peer review process. So
it's certainly an interesting conversation. We have that internally here at ISCB all the time. I have one more for you in the questions. Can the education links be used for classroom or personal use, or is it more like a forum?
For the education collection, we have had some, I think, some summer school stuff published in there. So the documents are kind of training materials that can get a DOI. So if you did want to publish one of those there and then use that for the classroom, that would be fine. So that's kind of the idea behind the collection.
Ooh, we just had another one come in. Cool. Regarding publishing the articles, how does F1000 deal with security issues?
In terms of people taking data, or?
Let's say yes. In terms of yes, data encoding. Thank you,
okay.
Ambry.
Yeah. So we don't host the data encode ourselves. We ask you to put that in a suitable repository. We're not set up for that in terms of kind of the FAIR guidelines, but we have a list on our website of kind of repositories that we've checked out and we think are suitable. They're usually kind of community-based ones. So in terms of code, we're happy for you to have it on GitHub and put that as a link in. For the software tool articles, we have a software tool availability section. And then we also ask you to deposit it at Zenodo as well. So just to have a kind of archived version of it at publication as well. So it's a bit more stable. I don't know if you know if they also mean in terms of scooping. I would say, obviously, again, that's a bigger issue, but I think there's been a lot of kind of literature showing that making your data open often makes your article more citable. Completely understand the hesitations around it, but for us, we think that's a really important part of the transparency process.